Hey there, welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into something you've probably been hearing a lot about.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party and why they just can't seem to win elections.
Right.
Our source. A conversation with Brianna Wu,
Okay.
a prominent Democrat and video game developer featured on the Triggernometry YouTube channel.
Interesting.
Now, what makes this so interesting is that Wu is a Democrat who's willing to openly critique her own party
Yeah.
and call for some serious changes.
It's definitely not your typical partisan talking points.
Right.
Wu brings a unique insider perspective.
Yeah.
And what's striking is her argument that the Democrats have become completely disconnected
Oh, wow.
from the very people they claim to represent, working-class voters.
Interesting.
She argues that the party has become too focused on identity politics and appealing to elites, leaving everyday Americans feeling unheard and ignored.
And she doesn't mince words, does she?
No, not really.
Wu actually compares the way Democrats talk to different groups of voters, as if they're dumb animals to be manipulated.
Wow.
It's a harsh critique.
Yeah.
But it raises an important question.
Okay.
Do you think that Democrats have become too reliant on focus groups and prepackaged messaging, losing that genuine connection with voters?
It's a real possibility.
Yeah.
Wu suggests that this over-reliance on data and scripted talking points has created a sense of inauthenticity,
Okay.
making voters question whether the party truly understands or cares about their concerns.
Right.
And this disconnect, she argues, is a major reason why someone like Trump, with all his flaws, was able to connect with voters who felt that the Democrats had abandoned them.
This leads us to another point Wu makes.
Okay.
And it's one that's been generating a lot of debate.
All right.
She criticizes what she calls the Democrats' obsession with woke messaging and pronoun announcements.
Wow.
She argues that this approach, while well-intentioned, might be alienating moderate voters and reinforcing the perception that the party is out of touch with the concerns of everyday Americans.
This is where things get really interesting because Wu, as a trans woman herself, is able to speak from a position of both personal experience and political awareness.
Right.
She's not dismissing these issues altogether.
No.
But she is expressing concern about how they're being handled
Okay.
and the impact they're having on the party's broader appeal.
Right. And she uses a really powerful example to illustrate this point.
Okay.
Wu talks about mothers' reactions to neo-pronoun boxes for kindergartners.
Neo-pronoun boxes.
Yeah, so just so we're clear, these are boxes on forms where parents can indicate their child's preferred pronouns.
Oh, okay.
Wu found that many mothers, regardless of their political leanings, were uncomfortable with this.
Really?
It was too much too soon for young children.
Huh.
It's an example of how these issues, while important to discuss, can become a point of contention when they're perceived as being pushed too aggressively.
Okay.
Or without taking into account the concerns of a wider range of people.
And what's crucial here is Wu's point that the Republicans are capitalizing on this. They're effectively using these issues to paint the Democrats as out of touch and extreme.
Right.
Further solidifying their hold on voters who are uncomfortable with what they see as rapid social change.
Wu also takes aim at what she sees as a lack of courage and willpower within the Democratic Party.
Oh.
Particularly when it comes to engaging in open and honest debate.
Okay.
Especially in less controlled media environments.
I see.
She points out that high-level Democrats often decline invitations to appear on shows like the very one she's on.
Right.
Triggernometry, which is known for its willingness to host guests with a wide range of viewpoints, even those considered controversial.
Yeah.
In contrast, she highlights Trump's willingness to engage with diverse platforms, even those hostile to his views. Do you think this reluctance to engage in open debate is hurting the Democrats?
It's definitely a question worth considering.
Yeah.
Wu suggests that this avoidance of tough conversations reinforces the perception that the party is more interested in preaching to the choir than in engaging in genuine dialogue with those who hold different views.
Interesting.
She argues that this unwillingness to step outside of their comfort zone might be contributing to the party's growing disconnect with voters who feel ignored or dismissed.
And this leads to her call for a new generation of Democratic leaders.
Okay.
She specifically uses the term normal Democrats.
Normal Democrats.
And what she seems to be getting at is the need for individuals who can connect with working class voters, who can speak authentically about their concerns, and who can move away from what she calls the party's ultra-messaged approach.
So basically,
Essentially,
yeah.
she's arguing that the party needs to get real,
Okay.
to ditch the talking points and focus on having genuine conversations with the American people about the issues that matter most to them.
Right.
And she even hints at the possibility of running for office again,
Oh, really?
suggesting that she believes radical change might be necessary to save the party.
Now, one of the most revealing moments in the conversation is when Wu drops a bit of a bombshell. She reveals that despite the polls showing a tight race, many Democrats genuinely believed they were going to win the last election. They had so much faith in their sophisticated get-out-the-vote operations.
Get out the vote.
These are the organized efforts to get their supporters to actually cast their ballots, that they were seemingly blindsided by the loss.
Wow, it's almost as if they were living in a bubble, detached from the realities on the ground.
Yeah.
Raises an important question.
Okay.
Are the Democrats so caught up in their own data and strategies that they've lost touch with the pulse of the nation?
That's certainly a concern that Wu raises. She suggests that this detachment from reality might be a symptom of the party's broader problem, an over-reliance on data and analytics at the expense of genuine human connection.
We're back, continuing our deep dive into Brianna Wu's take on the Democratic Party's challenges.
Right.
Now, we've talked about their disconnect from working-class voters, this idea of woke messaging. But she goes deeper, suggesting that the Democrats are struggling to effectively counterattacks from the right.
You're picking up on a crucial point there.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just have your own message.
Right.
You have to be able to defend it and push back against opposing narratives.
Right.
Wu argues that the Democrats are falling short in this area, particularly when it comes to the transgender issue.
This is where it gets really nuanced.
Yeah.
Because Wu, being a trans woman herself, can speak to this from her perspective. Many others can't.
Right.
She's not saying trans rights aren't important.
No.
But she is raising concerns about how the debate is being framed.
Yeah.
And how the left is responding.
Exactly.
Yu contends that the trans movement has become so focused on defending what she calls a maximalist position.
Maximalist.
Meaning they're pushing for the most expansive rights and recognition possible.
Okay.
Often without much room for compromise.
I see.
She worries that this approach, while understandable, might be alienating potential allies and making it harder to build broader support for trans rights.
It's like they're so focused on winning the argument within their own circles that they're forgetting to persuade the people who aren't already on board.
Right.
Wu suggests that this might be creating an opening for the right to exploit the issue.
Yeah.
Framing it in terms that are ultimately harmful to the trans community.
She even goes so far as to say that the trans movement needs more sane leaders.
Sane leaders.
People who can articulate a message that resonates with a wider audience.
Right.
Someone who can bridge the gap between the activists and the everyday folks who might be hesitant or unsure about these issues.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Think about it this way.
Okay.
Have you ever felt like the conversation around trans rights has become so heated and polarized that it's hard to even ask questions or express any kind of uncertainty without being labeled transphobic?
That's definitely a sentiment I've heard from a lot of people.
Right.
Wu seems to be tapping into that sense of unease and suggesting that a different approach, one that focuses on dialogue and understanding rather than accusations and shutdowns, might be more effective in the long run.
Now, this is where Wu's background as a video game developer comes in.
Oh, interesting.
She understands the importance of storytelling.
Yeah.
Of creating narratives that resonate with a wide range of players.
Right.
She argues that the trans movement needs to get better at this.
Okay.
At crafting a story that speaks to people's hearts and minds, not just their sense of political correctness.
I see.
She suggests that instead of focusing on personal attacks and accusations of transphobia, the movement should focus on building bridges, finding common ground, and articulating a vision for trans rights that resonates with a wider swath of the American public.
So you're saying...
Does this mean compromising on core principles?
Right.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But it does mean thinking strategically about how to win hearts and minds, not just arguments.
Yeah. Wu's perspective on this is really insightful. And it brings us to another fascinating aspect of her conversation.
Okay.
Her changing views on the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Oh, wow.
This one might surprise you.
Yeah.
Especially considering her initial reluctance to take a strong stance on the issue.
Right. It's like she went on a journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
Starting from a place of admitting she didn't fully understand the complexities of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Then, after the recent war between Israel and Hamas,
Right.
she decided to really dig in, researching and talking to experts from both sides.
And that open-mindedness is what makes her story so compelling.
Absolutely.
Wu didn't just double down on her initial assumptions.
Right.
She actively sought out information, challenged her own biases, and allowed the evidence to lead her to a new understanding of the conflict.
Yeah.
It's a great example of how challenging ourselves intellectually can lead to personal growth.
Absolutely. Now, here's the twist.
Okay.
Wu, who initially held a neutral stance, ended up changing her mind completely.
Wow.
She became convinced that Israel's actions in the recent conflict were justified,
Really?
a conclusion that surprised even her.
This shift was driven by a few things.
Okay.
First, she was struck by the fact that none of the pro-Palestinian guests she spoke with could offer a convincing answer to the question of what Israel should have done differently when faced with Hamas's attacks.
Right.
They could criticize, but they couldn't provide a realistic alternative.
And secondly, as she delved deeper into the history and ideology of Hamas, she became increasingly troubled by their tactics and their stated goals. This combination of factors led her to believe that Israel was, in fact, acting in self-defense.
Interesting.
Have you ever found yourself reevaluating your stance on a complex issue like this?
Yeah.
After encountering new information or perspectives?
It's a common experience,
Right.
And Wu's journey highlights the importance of staying open to new information and challenging our own biases.
For sure.
Now, what makes her case even more interesting is that she started to see this shift in her own thinking as reflective of a larger trend within the left.
Okay.
She noticed a growing disconnect between the ideological stances of many progressives and the realities on the ground, particularly in the Middle East.
We're back, wrapping up our deep dive into Brianna Wu's sharp critique of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
From woke messaging to the complexities of the Israel-Palestine conflict,
Right.
Wu isn't afraid to challenge her own side and call for a serious reality check.
It's refreshing to hear someone speak so candidly, especially from within the party.
Right.
It raises the question, are the Democrats so focused on their own internal narratives that they've lost sight of the bigger picture?
Yeah.
The needs and concerns of everyday Americans.
Wu certainly seems to think so.
Yeah.
And she doesn't just point fingers.
Right.
She offers some solutions.
Right.
Remember her call for normal Democrats?
Yeah.
It's this idea that the party needs leaders who can connect with working-class voters.
Okay.
People who aren't afraid to ditch the carefully crafted talking points and engage in genuine, honest conversations.
It's about moving beyond ideology and getting back to the basics.
Right.
Listening to people's concerns, understanding their struggles, and offering solutions that actually address their needs.
And this brings us back to Wu's own journey,
Okay.
which is a powerful example of intellectual honesty and open-mindedness.
Yeah, for sure.
Think about how her views on the Israel-Palestine conflict evolved. She didn't shy away from admitting her initial lack of deep knowledge,
Yeah.
and then actively sought out diverse perspectives, engaged in thoughtful dialogue,
Right.
and ultimately arrived at a conclusion that challenged her initial assumptions.
That willingness to challenge her own beliefs, to be open to changing her mind based on evidence and reasoned arguments, is something she believes is sorely lacking in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers, that we can always learn and grow from engaging with those who hold differing views.
And that's a powerful lesson for all of us, isn't it?
It is.
In a world that's increasingly polarized and divided,
Yeah.
it's easy to retreat into our own echo chambers, surrounded by people who agree with us.
Right.
But Wu's story reminds us that true growth often comes from stepping outside of those comfort zones,
For sure.
from engaging with people who challenge our assumptions and force us to rethink our perspectives.
Now, one of the most provocative and perhaps controversial points Wu makes is her critique of the left's discomfort with strength.
Okay.
She argues that the Democratic Party has become so averse to the use of force, so focused on diplomacy and appeasement,
Right.
that it's projecting an image of weakness and indecisiveness on the world stage.
She uses a striking analogy,
Yeah.
comparing the left's approach to a more feminine mindset
Okay.
that prioritizes compromise and consensus building,
Right.
contrasting it with a more masculine mindset that recognizes the need for strength and decisiveness in certain situations.
That's a bold comparison.
It is.
And it sparked a lot of debate.
Right.
Some have criticized it as being overly simplistic or even sexist. But if we move beyond the labels and look at the core of her argument, I think there's a valuable point to consider.
Okay.
Is there a place for strength and assertiveness in a world that's often defined by power dynamics? Can a political party or a nation effectively advocate for its interests and values without being willing to stand up for them, even if it means taking a tough stance or making difficult choices?
Those are questions that are worth pondering, not just in the context of foreign policy, but also in terms of domestic politics.
Yeah.
How do you balance the need for compromise and collaboration with the willingness to stand firm on your principles?
Exactly.
It's a challenge that every leader in every field has to grapple with.
And ultimately, that's what makes Wu's perspective so thought-provoking.
I agree.
She's not just offering easy answers or partisan talking points. She's raising fundamental questions about leadership ideology and the very nature of power in the 21st century.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we leave you with this final thought. Can a political party truly reform itself? Or does it inevitably become a prisoner of its own ideology?
Interesting.
And if real change is possible, what would it look like?
Good questions.
These are questions worth pondering, not just for Democrats, but for anyone who cares about the future of our political system.
Wu's insights have given us a lot to chew on.
They have.
And we hope they've sparked some interesting conversations for you as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.